Disclaimer under Section 107 of the Copyright Act 1976. Allowance is made for fair use for purposes such as criticism, comment, news reporting, scholarship, and research. Fair use is a use permitted by copyright statute that might otherwise be infringing. Nonprofit, educational, or personal use tips the balance in favor of fair use.
Okay, was I just tripping or was it skipping?
Nah, that was you. It was clear.
Okay, cool. Good. I'm about to say it better been smooth, man. I pay enough for internet, but I don't know why I was just tripping on my screen. But yeah, man, what's up, everybody? Welcome to another episode of Breaking the Barriers, where we discuss the tough topics by attacking the issues and not each other. As you can see, we got a nice loaded panel for you here today. Everybody go ahead and introduce yourselves. Go ahead, Suni.
I am Sony Blanks. You can find me on all of my social media platforms under Sony Blanks.
Jess.
I am Jess, and I am the regional director for Blexit.
Gothics.
My name is Vanessa. I go by Gothics Online. You can find me at Gothics TV on YouTube.
Love your background. Deontay.
Thanks.
Background is fire, yes. My name is Deontay Blade Ford. I like to consider myself an autodidactic person. I like politics. I like philosophy and pretty much everything under the sun. But yeah, I'm just here to, contribute my thoughts, and that's that. Follow me at D Blade Ford on all my social media handles.
All right, so check it out, everybody. Today it's gonna be a little different. Normally I have a couple videos or something to put up here that we talk about, but this time I wanted to leave it open for more like a podcast feel, where we are just talking and giving our opinions about some things. And the topic of discussion, before I give it to you, I need everybody that's watching right now, because we are getting some nice viewership going on. Do me a favor, like this video, share this video with somebody else. Tell them to come and join the discussion. The discussion is, what can we do to change how we view the world, how we interact with each other, and how we view each other? Can we break the shackles on our minds? And if we can't, then what do we do next? Who wants to take it? Who wants to go first? What could we do? Deontay, go for it, bro. You got to go for it. Tell me what you think. Can we? Is it even possible? Can we stop how we view each other? Can we stop how people see, like the conversation that we were having earlier, right? When we were on the TikTok live, when I said, what is it that gets into a person's mind, right? Like for me, when I see somebody wearing a mask, I get triggered, and I couldn't even explain why, but I seen it. I made a whole video about it. Like, why are you wearing a mask? It's the summertime. It's hot outside. You're young. What's with the mask? You're not sick. And I got instantly, I'm thinking in my head, this person, I did all the labels. This person's a liberal. This person bought the hype. This person, you know what I'm saying? I all the stuff came into my head, and I'm thinking to myself, why do you do that? Why does it matter if that person's wearing a mask? Why am I so divided within myself about what the hell this person got going on? You know what I'm saying? So I had to change how I was viewing the situation.
So you know me, man. I tend to be a bit of a realist. I think realistically, no. Tribalism is inevitable. I would say that it's a part of human nature. There is no harmonious utopian society in which everyone can coexist and come together despite their strong ideological differences. When it comes to changing ourselves or changing how we see other people, I think that the foundation of change is acknowledging that you have to change. So and nobody else can make you want to change but yourself. I mean, people can influence you, sure, but at the end of the day, it comes down to you feeling like there's something about yourself that needs to be modified. Um, but yeah, I think if there's an attempt to be made, I think if there's any type of strategy that we could employ to try to see if we can bring about this more harmonious society, is doing what you do, right? Which is bringing people from different places on the political spectrum, from different philosophies, people that are strongly opposed to one another ideologically, and having civil discourse. If I can listen to someone that's on the left side of the political spectrum or that may belong to a different religion, and I can hear their tenets, their values, their principles, then I can say, okay, well, there are commonalities here, and maybe we can build on the common ground and set aside some of the staunch differences we have. The concern is, how, are the staunch differences more powerful than the commonalities? And if they are stronger, how sustainable is it, right, for us to be able to operate among each other? And I think that's kind of, and I'll end here and say, I think that's what we've been dealing with throughout the history of man, is those differences have been stronger than the commonalities.
Okay.
I actually agree with that. I was kind of on TikTok talking about that, where I feel you can extend grace, but only for so long until it turns into insanity, because you keep repeating the same cycle, expecting different results. But then I feel like I got to check myself and say, well, am I doing this to change this person, or am I doing it to plant a seed and hopefully they water it? And I think that's where a lot of us like run into this wall of frustration, where we're like, water the damn plant, just water it. And then maybe you can see what I see. Not that I want them to change, but I've come a long way. Cash, I've come a long way. It was hard, but it's doable. So I think it's willpower, and it's us extending grace. But then the question, kind of what Deontay said, how far does that go before you just cut it off and say, forget it?
Okay. Gothics, what's your take?
So, my take on this, and I've definitely gone through an evolution of the way that I handle these types of conversations. I think in 2020, when I initially had my wake up moment, my political awakening, I was more adamant about, like, I wanted to shake people, like, wake up! Why can't you see what I see? And I realized that the vast majority of people they're blind, and they're not gonna see what you see until something happens to them personally. And that's usually, that's what happened to me. So I do agree, extending grace, but also I think we have to work on trying to meet people where they are, because a lot of the times when people hold these really crazy political positions, there is an emotional aspect to it. Whether it's they're afraid of being ostracized by their community, or, maybe they have some type of derangement syndrome that, and they're harboring some type of an emotional aspect to it. So understanding why they believe the things that they do, because most people don't actually have a logical reason for their positions, from what I've noticed. Because if you ask them, like, how did you come to this conclusion? Most people are just throwing around slogans. Like, there isn't an actual deeper understanding of their beliefs. So
Facts.
a part of it is just being patient, but also knowing when to draw the line. Like, I'm a Christian, so I extend grace to people, but I also know not to waste my time throwing pearls to swine. Like, if someone just wants to be combative, I'm not going to waste my time.
There you go. I like it. Jess.
I love it. Yeah, that was brilliant.
So I'm learning about this grace thing myself, and it's a learning process for sure. And similar to Vanessa, is that it's, when I did the change from being a Democrat to more conservative now, I'm just like, I don't understand why people are not seeing things. But, I had to go through my own process too and see things the way that I had to see it. So I'm just gonna, I'm at the point where now I'm like, I'm not gonna try to go too far with you. I'm not gonna get aggravated. We're gonna have this conversation. You're gonna get upset. I'm not gonna get upset. And that's what it's gonna be, because that's my grace to myself, is not getting aggravated over something that I can't control. And I think that eventually people will see, they'll see on their own time, or they just won't.
Okay. Josh, what about you, man?
Hey man, thanks for having me on again. What
It's all
was
love.
the I missed the initial question.
So the way people view the world, like how you view the world, right? What can you do to help somebody? I'm gonna make it simpler. What can you do to have somebody else see your side, to see your view?
Uh yeah, I agree with Gothics where that you have the emotional current that they might not be aware of driving how they think. And so logic doesn't really touch that because the emotions have to change. And I think you have to they can only hear your message when they know that you're their friend or that you're like you're not othering them or dehumanizing them where they can feel uh you know again that's like a more expansive emotional state of being like hey like on some level we're all one, at least that's what I believe. And you're not my enemy, and I'm going to tell the truth, and I know that's going to annoy them and make them freak out and cry or have some other reaction, but showing them the that high mature level where you're like, listen, I disagree with you, here's why. You're cool, man. I'm not going to come after you, I'm not going to hurt you. And I mean, I don't always keep this, by the way. I talk a lot of shit in the culture war, and I'm pretty awful sometimes, but I do
Me too,
strive
bro.
for that. Yeah, dude, I'm awful sometimes and I get annoyed and I get out of my balance. So it is what it is, but calling people woke tards and all kinds of stuff like that. But yeah, I think we can come from a higher level while maintaining integrity and boundaries.
I like all of your guys' answers. For me, the way that I view it, right? This is literally something that I've adopted and it's like ingrained in me now. So it's you have to know your audience, and then you also have to know your purpose. Why are you trying to get them to see what it is that you want them to see? Why are you even taking the time to talk to them in the first place? What is the purpose behind it? What's your goal? Right. And then knowing the audience. So when I get in front of a conservative audience, I can hit on all the points that people already know about as a conservative, right? I could hit on the jobs and why the economy was better underneath the last administration compared to this administration. I can articulate why I like Trump more than I like Kamala. I can articulate, all the different things that I want to articulate to an audience that already is receptive to it because they're conservative, right? But say I'm talking to an audience of gangbangers, and my goal is to educate them, number one, about the importance of voting, or get them to see that their lifestyle is wrong. I would not walk in there and just start talking the way that I would be talking on the stage to a bunch of conservatives, right? I would go in there with, the other side of cash or where I come from, and I'll talk to them on their level. Like you said, meet them where they're at, and I wouldn't bring up anything about what's wrong with a Kamala Harris. I would bring it to a place of, talking about the policies that have gone through over time that have crippled, the communities where we come from. I would stay away from like a racial thing and say impoverished communities, and it's all about that for me. It's about knowing your audience and your goal. And my ultimate goal is unity. At the end of the day, if I can't change their mind about anything, I want them to know that I'm a brother that they could come to. You know what I'm saying? So my view of how we get each other to, how we open people's eyes to see the world differently, is to just be a different type of person, be that type of person, be open to their opinions, be open to their thoughts, and be open to their grievances, because they got grievances that even though I might not have experienced or went through, in their mind, it's real and it happened to them. So, and too many times we send people into these places to try to talk to people that they can't relate to. They just can't relate.
Facts. I agree with that 1000%. In fact, I think that's where I don't even want to say but I think that's where the right struggles a lot. There's only a certain amount of people propped up, and they are charged with speaking to a plethora of people that don't necessarily relate to them. And if we're going to have a big tent, then be a big tent. Allow more people on the stage, allow more people, help people with their platforms. And it doesn't even have to be monetarily. Share their content, do something, because we're behind in the culture war right now. And maybe this is why we're having this conversation now, is because so many people can recognize that we are severely behind in the culture war. We're having a hard time relating to constituents outside of our bubble, our circle.
So what do you feel? That this is a good question I got for y'all right now. You just brought this on, Suni. So do we all agree that we're in a culture war?
Absolutely.
Absolutely.
We
Heck
do?
100%.
Kind of.
Okay, good. All right. So if we
Culture
are in
war
a culture war,
of Mao's proportions.
check it out. If we are in a culture war, what culture are we at war with, and what culture are we trying to implement?
Same order or
It don't matter. Whoever wants to take the floor first.
I would say that culture war is nonstop. Ideology is warfare, right? If Gothics thinks one thing, Sunni thinks one thing, and you think one thing, we are all in the marketplace of ideas trying to sell our idea to other individuals to acquire the largest following or audience, so that way our ideology can dominate the marketplace. So there's never not a culture war. The thing is that in the United States of America, there's been a dominant culture, pretty much from its inception until the 1960s.
What culture is that?
Uh, so I don't want to misrepresent what culture that is. So let me think on that. I mean, because there's a couple of different words that come to mind. I could say Eurocentric culture, but then that's a little anti-academic, because the founding fathers of this country rejected many elements of European culture to reconstruct kind of their own framework or model. So they departed.
Let me make it a little simpler, right? What culture are we at war with?
Oh, great question. Me personally, I'm going to say that we're still in a continuation of the Cold War, and so there's a competing idea between, if I was to simplify it, capitalism, liberty, freedom, and a constitutional form of government, as opposed to socialism, Marxism, and collectivism. If I was to try to simplify it, but I think that's overly simplistic. But it's individualism versus collectivism.
Okay. Suni, what culture are we at war with?
I think culture is what's like colloquially accepted amongst people. But what I really think is happening is a battle between good and evil. I think it's more of a spiritual thing. I think that we are at war with literal evil. And the best way to get it across to people is by saying it's this culture versus this culture, because a lot of people will reject you coming from a religious lens. Has been my experience, because there's so many different people, so many different denominations. So for me, it's a battle between good and evil. It's that simple for me.
So let me if I can
hold on real quick, Deontay. I want to get everybody to get their thought. Jess, what do you think? Are we in a culture war? And if so, what culture are we at war with?
I mean, I think that we definitely in a culture war. I think it's definitely good versus evil. But I think it's poured into politics in a way where we're using left versus right, and to be honest, not even in a good way on either side. I don't really like the use of God to get political gain. It's just run on what you're gonna do. I think it's getting a little weird when we start using that term, because to represent all Americans, you have to make sure that you are meeting them where they're at religiously across the board. And I think that like the whole Christian Catholic thing that we're talking about, when you think about representing Americans, you have to think about all the cultures that we represent for America.
Okay. Gothics?
Yeah, so I said I kind of believe it's a culture war. That's initially what I thought. But I do agree that it is a war between good and evil, because culture stems from our presuppositions of what is good and evil. Like when we go to vote for a policy, we're voting based on our pre-existing worldview. So whose worldview is the moral worldview is really the question.
Yeah.
Yes. Josh.
I have a question about that too.
I got you. Hold on to it. Josh, are we in a culture war? And if so, what is the culture we're at war with?
Yeah, I think we're in a war between, like everyone else touched on, different ideologies trying to dominate the the populist scape, if you want to put it that way, to try to get the minds of the people to be with them so that they can put their worldview onto that population and also extract the resources in their particular ways. Um, it's statism. I think the war is against people who want government and people who want less or no government. And that the push between those two forces are what's the tension that we call the culture war. I think it's people who want more government and people who want less. And
I like that.
and we know we have a class of people that put policies on us that get bought out and paid off by corporations and lobbyists. Like, we know that game. And so whoever wins, they get to do their shit for a little while, and we just go
Okay.
back and forth without actually ever doing anything.
Okay. Well, for me, are we in a culture war? I guess it depends on where you stand with your own ideology, is what I'll say. For my personal ideology, I don't believe that I'm not in a culture war. I'm not in a culture war. And the simple fact that this is how I'll explain this. I believe in America, right? And America has always been a mixture of different cultures together. That was the whole idea of America, for people to be able to come over here from wherever they come from and take part in the American dream, the American experience, and still hold on to their culture. And we've celebrated it. We have Chinatown, we have Greek Town, we got Jewtown, we got Little Italy, we got all these different places in our societies that celebrate different cultures. So I think that the term culture war is a political tool that is being used to demonize one side and promote another side. And that's the only time that culture war is really used, is when it comes to a political agenda. And then the reason why it's dangerous is because they ascribe a certain culture to people, and they use race, they use religion, they use gender, they use all these different, like the woke agenda, right? And that can be ascribed to a culture. They're create the LGBTQ culture, but isn't an LGBTQ culture. So I feel like that's dangerous. And to bring it back to what everybody else said, I believe we are more in a battle of good and evil, because in all cultures, there's some things that are good that we all like, and then there's some things that are bad that we disagree with. And the last thing that I want to say is, when I said what culture are we trying to replace it with? What would that be? What would be the culture if we are in a culture war and we see all these different things? What culture are we trying to replace it with?
Common sense. I know people say that doesn't exist anymore, but
I don't know what it is.
I personally think it does. I mean, it's not hard to tell what's good and what's bad. But when we give people the opportunity to push out their interpersonal beliefs on what's good and what's bad, is where the confusion comes. I think if there was just a standard that everybody accepted, we wouldn't have this. I always think back to the 90s. To me, that was the greatest time ever. Of course, that's when I was born, right? But I think back to the 90s when none of this mattered. Like, no one cared who you voted for. No one cared what you did in your bedroom. Kids went outside and played. The internet wasn't a big thing. Families were more cohesive and together. That was clearly a time where none of that mattered. And people had an understanding of what was good and what was bad, regardless of your own interpersonal views.
So I'm a Christian as well. And I totally resonate with this sentiment, or this construction of good versus evil, but I think it's overly simplistic. And if I'm going to deal with reality is that Christendom is not united. It's not uniform. There are strong dogmatic differences, doctrinal differences. You have one element of the church saying that they represent the true body of Christ and the true doctrine, et cetera, et cetera. There's conflict within the church. And so to say that it's good versus evil, these presuppositions about what's good or evil, or this understanding of morality, differs from within Christianity or within Christendom. I'll say this. I'm going to quote a Marxist, and I'm not a Marxist. I disagree with communism and Marxism and all of its derivatives of thought. But I think that me being opposed to them in their thinking, I need to understand how they think. And so Theodore Adorno said, intolerance of ambiguity is the mark of an authoritarian personality. I'm going to read that one more time. Intolerance of ambiguity is the mark of an authoritarian personality. So Cash, for example, right, just says the United States has always been a admixture or a multitude of different cultures and ideas. And the moment one person tries to superimpose what they think is good, what they think is right, what they think is the opposite of evil, right? That's authoritarian in nature. Now I understand the objective. The objective can be, well, I think that my moral framework is superior and it produces better results, and therefore, right? It gets back to my original question that I asked Sony. How long do you try to compromise with people who you're opposed to ideologically before you say, I'm not compromising anymore. Now we're going to use force and I'm going to make you adopt what I think is right.
Okay. So I hear you, right? But this is where I was going. This is where I was going with this. The cultures aren't the problem unless they're breaking the law, because that's the one thing that we have. The moral compass that we all have in this country as an American is the law. Plain and simple, the Constitution, right? And then your state constitution and laws. So your moral compass, no matter if you're a Christian or whatever type of Christian you are, or whatever type of Muslim you are, or whatever type of Jew you are, does not supersede your state's laws or your nation's laws. So what you think is good and evil doesn't apply in a nation that has a constitution, because the Constitution says what is right and what is wrong, and then the laws that are made by the people that govern your said state. So then, if that's the case, what's the problem with people having different cultures that you deem bad that aren't breaking the law?
That's a loaded question. I'm gonna be honest with you.
It's thought-provoking.
Yeah, I agree. That's pretty loaded. Because I mean,
It's
I think you do have to have the standard, kind of like what Suni was saying. But at the same time, you want to have your own moral compass of what you feel is good. But then you can run off that. But then are you breaking the law? Are you going to jail? Like, what's going to happen next? So
well,
I think the only moral compass we can kind of maybe stay with is just the laws that we got.
I also want to interject really quickly because you mentioned about like the different, how we have like a bunch of different denominations with their own different interpretation of scripture. I think that you're never going to find a uniformed community following a singular thing in any situation, whether it's religious or not. But that doesn't change what is true. Like if a speed limit says 30 miles an hour and I'm going 90, the law didn't change. I changed. So we still have to be able to cling to an objective moral standard. And I think the problem, and I understand what you're saying about like the Constitution, but this is one of the big problems that I have with people. It's like I don't want anyone to adopt cultural Christianity and pretend that they're a believer. That's not my game here. But I do like to pose the question to people like, okay, where do you get your standard for morality? And a lot of the times people say, oh, I get it from the laws. And it's like, okay, but the laws can always change. So what then?
exactly.
I think that's a great point. I actually want people to adopt cultural Christianity. That's my personal preference. Like I brought up, so people have to go explore what cultural Christianity is. One of the four horsemen, they call him, of the new atheist school, right? Richard Dawkins, probably the most prominent atheist in the world, calls himself a cultural Christian. But it's not because he believes in the Bible. It's because he looks at Islam and he looks at Christianity and he thinks that one is superior and the other one is disastrous, diabolically evil. And so he believes that to combat the spread of Islam, even atheists should adopt cultural Christianity. But when I hear that thought, I think about Nietzsche, bro. Nietzsche, right? I think in the late 1800s, I think it's 1900s, excuse me, said God is dead. But in the same book, the Zarathustra book, he talked about you can't get rid of the religion of Christianity and preserve Judeo-Christian ethics or principles. It's impossible. But that's what secular humanists try to do.
So you know what's interesting is this point that I was going to make is the Constitution is actually derived, technically, the way that even that our states are set up and the way that our cities are set up comes from Mosaic law.
Really?
Yeah. Moses, when Jethro came to him, he told him, man, the people is they got too many people. This is getting hard. It's a lot of, I'm getting all these problems. And Jethro told him, well, this is what you do. You set up these people to be your chiefs, and then you have them set up the people underneath them to bring them their issues. And if it's important, then they will bring it to them, and then they will bring it to you if it gets to be that important. Hence, we have a Supreme Court.
I can see that. I guess I can see that. I don't know. You know, like that's crazy you said that. I just read a quote earlier, bro, and it said it's a quote from one of the founding fathers, and it says verbatim, Thomas Jefferson, Christianity neither is nor ever was a part of the common law. Christianity is the most perverse system that ever shore on man. Religions are all alike, founded upon fables and mythologies.
Mm-hmm. But that's because he wasn't. They didn't model it after Christianity. They modeled it after Mosaic law. How Moses was running the Israelites.
I would say that they modeled it after the Roman Republic, mixed with maybe a little bit of Athenian democracy. They blended this concept of a republic with some democracy, but they were opposed to autocracy.
You're definitely correct.
But I'm not saying that you're wrong. I can see that there's some similarities between the two.
With all of this, right? Like with all of this, we see. Let me ask you all this question. What are some of the issues that you see within American culture that you feel are detrimental and they keep people divided, or they keep people in a state of ignorance, or they keep people in a state of poverty, or they keep people in anything that you feel is the issue that is part of that culture that does that?
If I'm going to be honest, it's the rejection of God, because you replace God with something else. And if you consider people's highest authority, some people, they get their values and their worldview from their community or what their teachers tell them, and forget if their teachers are teaching them propaganda or anything like that. That they just trust that these people in authority are the ones that they should center their lives around. And so that's why you need to have an authority that transcends human civilization, because then you run into this problem where people are trying to fill the void of where God should be. They put other things in there, and then that trickles down into culture.
But then,
can I ask you a question?
I got you. I'm gonna let you get it right quick, but check this out, right? I love that response, but then it comes into question, which God?
That's a good question.
You already asked. You just asked my question, Cash.
That's a great question.
That's the whole thing about America.
Yeah.
See, that's the thing. The way that it's designed is so, okay, you can worship whatever God you want in this country.
Yeah.
Right?
Well, that's okay. Sure, you can worship whatever God you want. That's a question that comes down to researching. Like if you have an abundance out on there, look at the differences. Forget about how they are identical. Look at the differences between these religions, and then ask yourself, is this something that I would like to mirror? Like, is this something that's actually good? And I know people's standards for good that can vary or whatever, but I would say at least start researching. And I had another point. Oh yeah, this idea all religions are valid is a contradiction because they all contradict each other. So like it's sort of like this topical slogan, like this whole coexist thing. It's like to make people happy and cushy, and it's like no, they actually contradict each other. So you gotta research. You gotta look into it.
Well, how do you fight with a let's say an atheist who says, well, the reason why I am an atheist is because I have studied all the theology and every single one of those gods seem horrible.
Yeah. Well, what do you mean by horrible?
I'm not picking and doing. I'm gonna hit everybody, right? So, and I do not agree with these things that I'm about to say. I am a believer. All right, I'm just
playing devil's advocate.
Devil's advocate. Okay, an atheist will come to you and say, "Well, I can't get with Islam Number one, because he is for basically the genocide of a people that's not Muslim, and that's prevalent all throughout the Quran. If they don't convert, they die, right? And
or they're
then
under extreme subjugation.
However you want to look at it, especially if they're a Jew. If they're a Jew, you take them. That's what they say, right? So also we use the Torah, the first 5 books of Moses, that God slayed the firstborns of Egypt. That God in the Old Testament also told David, hey, you go into the city and you take out everybody, men, women, and children, but you could keep the virgins. And then you go to Christianity, and then atheists will make the argument. Well, this is what I read this the other day in a TikTok space. This was their thing. It said, God doesn't care about abortion. For God's sake, he sacrificed his own son. That was their argument. Okay. Right. So for an atheist, do we have any atheists on the panel? Josh, are you an atheist?
No.
Okay, but
there's no such thing as an atheist technically.
What's your take on that? Like, how do you make somebody even subscribe to a God when they can find any kind of flaw in a religion due to their own type of thinking?
You want me to answer it?
Yeah,
okay. I don't think it's any of our business what people believe. I understand what you all were saying with the fact that, right, we're supposedly under Judeo-Christian values. You said it was different, but whatever that is, like, having that is a unifying force. But I believe we're too big of a society in that we thrive better as humans in small communities like the Amish. I'm not saying you have to live like them, but I'm saying working and actually being close-knit. That's why we always talk about the nuclear family being destroyed, but we've already been destroyed in that we don't really have real community like the Native Americans or the Amish, or even our early founders in America lived in actual communities. We don't have that. So
perfect. It's a perfect segue.
Yeah, I'm getting lost, but go ahead.
No, that's the perfect segue for the next topic that I was going to bring to the table. It was going to be our last one. Go ahead, Deontay. Get your piece out, and then I'm gonna hit on community.
I want to address what God said.
I want to address something too. I got so much to say.
Go ahead.
Hey, I mean, I don't know if I know you like to keep them to an hour, bro. But I mean, hey,
no, we can keep it rolling for a little bit. Let's do this.
I done watched you live stream for about 3 hours, bro. So hey,
we can do it. Go ahead.
You can't bring up. You can't spark.
No, this is good. The discussion is actually going very well, man. Okay. I'm liking this. It's thought provoking. So let's keep it going. Go ahead, Deontay, and then Gothics, you take it.
So a couple of minutes ago, right, I said that I'm an advocate of people being, I wouldn't say forced or coerced, because I wrestle with the authoritarian mindset at times. I think we all do. I wrestle with the authoritarian personality. I do. But I think it brings us back to the beginning of our conversation when I said that ideology is warfare. There's always a war of ideas that we're trying to sell to the marketplace. And ultimately, we're trying to say, my idea is better than yours. My idea produces better results than yours, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. So I would tell Gothics, right, that I think that the argument, I'm not here to disprove the theological claims of Muslims. Right, because I know that a Muslim is not going to, if they choose to relinquish their subscription to that belief system, that's a personal choice. What I'm here to argue is that Christianity produces better societies. I'm here to argue that, okay, well, let me explain. Okay, when we look at the Enlightenment, when we look at the Protestant Reformation, when we look at the formation of the Constitution and the jurisprudence or the body of law that we have in the United States, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. All these things derive or stem from Christian nations and countries. Okay, the UK, okay, Scotland, England, Ireland, Wales, and America. And this may seem a little favorable or biased, but I think that our societies have produced the best results. It's when America began to adopt external cultures, intersectionality, critical theory, and trying to blend and accommodate what she just brought up, coexist, multiculturalism, right? That there was a departure from the things that made us successful as a country. And so I get it, it's easy for the people that are critical of what I'm saying now to say, let me go back to those time periods and look at all the things that are wrong, right? So I can magnify those things to make it look like this was just so toxic and evil. But the reality is that Christian nations have been the best and the strongest nations in the world, economically, militaristically, in terms of government, freedom, liberty, etc. Right? We don't get a Magna Carta from Muslim countries. We don't get a Bill of Rights from Muslim countries. We don't get anti-monarchism and a departure from being under totalitarian rule, right? From non-Christian countries. All of these things happened in nations, and maybe Christian country isn't the accurate term, but nations where Christianity is the dominant religion. Okay. So that's my statement.
I wanted to go back to Kelly. You asked earlier, like, what would you say to an atheist? What was the question? It was like, what do you say to atheists when atheists are making all of these claims like Christianity is so barbaric or something like that?
I said, what do you tell an atheist when an atheist says, well, I've studied all these different theologies and I don't want to be a part of them because all of them have a horrible God?
Yeah. So here's the problem. So I asked you, what do you mean by horrible? That's literally the question that I would ask someone, particularly an atheist, is what do you mean by that? Because you are injecting a moral standard. So I want to know where you're getting that standard from. Is this just your personal opinion, or is there something that you are importing to make that claim? Because if you remove God out of the equation, now you're basically saying that your moral standards, your worldview is coming from other people, whether it's philosophy, your community, your teachers, whatever. And that's just your opinion, you know? Mm-hmm. And I think Josh mentioned something about like, well, it's none of our business that we should just, you know, if people believe certain things, it's not really any of our business. Mm-hmm. I want to equate that almost to the phrase of like live and let live, which I reject now. I used to be for that, but now I reject it because some people's worldview or their religion could contribute to, you know, mass murder or something atrocious that we can see as morally wrong. Well, that's their worldview. Who are we to say that, you know, we shouldn't allow that in society? So I think we have to, you know, be wise about these conversations and consider the possibility that maybe it is impossible to be tolerant to everything. We have to set hard boundaries, I think. And I think for the most part, a lot of people in Western civilization are not saying you, Josh, by the way, I don't want to put you on the spot, but I feel like a lot of people are very, you know, let's just kumbaya and just hug everyone and everyone is valid. And I think that's a road to hell.
All right. Sony, how you feel?
What was that?
How you feeling about all of this? Go ahead, add into the discussion.
Oh, I don't believe in live and let living. I don't believe in accepting every single person's thoughts because I agree with what Gothic said. Where'd you get it from? If it's your own interpersonal belief, then that's your opinion. And where did that opinion come from? The people who you got that opinion from, where were they inspired from? It all comes from somewhere. So I think we need to draw a very hard line because not drawing a line in the sand has brought us to the point where we are now, where we have to accommodate every single person and every single belief and every single thought, or you're labeled a bigot. I think we should be okay with being labeled those things, and be firmly okay with. We're going to disagree with people in this country. There's 330 million people in America.
There's only 120 left. There's only 120 million.
I know Kamala said 220 million died. We're going to pray for her.
Go ahead.
Right. But there's too many people here for all of us to get on one accord. So it's kind of like find your tribe and dominate. All right. I'm going to push my worldview. And if you agree with it, cool. If you don't, cool. I don't really care. But I'm not going to change.
It's real interesting having these conversations, right? Because I'm a believer, right? And I don't fall into a category of any type of Christianity. I don't think. I just call myself a believer, you know, for the way that I believe. And in that, it makes me think about Christ, right? When he was walking on the earth, he called out the Pharisees when they called him out, when they questioned him. He just didn't go and you know, just go antagonize. He waited. They brought people to him and asked him questions, try to trap him up, and then he gave his answer back, and he stood on it. But when they tried to really test him, he said, "Yo, you of your father the devil. I'm of my father. I'm doing God's business. You of your father the devil," right? And he continued to teach. That's the stance that I feel, for me anyway, that needs to be taken. It's like I'm a teach and I'm gonna be me. That's the best way that I can influence the world, is by being the best me, being the best Cash, and saying my piece, not trying to offend. And I love this phrase: a hurt dog is gonna be the one to holler. So if you hollering and I'm not doing nothing to try to offend you, and I'm not saying nothing in an offensive way to try to get you to be offended, and you holler, well, then that means that you the one that's out here perpetrating these things that is wrong, according to me, what I think is wrong. So, I mean, yeah, let's go ahead, Sony.
But offense is conviction. When someone feels offended, that means that you've convicted a certain part of them to the point where they're going to think. I think we should utilize that tool. I don't think accommodating people in madness is going to help them. This is like asking people to affirm someone in this fake gender what do they call it, theory, where people can just be whatever they want. And okay, if you want to use this pronoun, okay, I'm gonna refer to you as that. We're actively lying, and it's not helping them. We have to help these people. They need help, truly. So when you say I'm not here to offend, that made me think, why not? Because correction is love. When someone is offended, you are convicting something within them.
So
I hear you. I real quick. I hear you, right? When I say that I'm not trying to offend, it means I'm not going out of my way to be offensive, even though I'm standing on my truth. You see what I'm saying? Like, I don't go out and attack. If I see personally, if I see somebody that is transgender on the street, I'm not going to go up to them and say, you know, you're living wrong and you're going to go to hell and God is going to punish you.
Yeah.
If they wave and say hi, I'm gonna be like, hey, how you doing?
Yeah.
And I'm just gonna keep, I'm gonna keep being a good person. You know, that's
You're
it.
letting
I'm not gonna let that's their thing. And they're not asking me a question. Now, if they came up to me like, hey, how I can't believe you're talking to me. I see you're wearing that MAGA hat and it doesn't bother you that I'm trans. And I would say, well, yeah, it bothers me in the sense that, like, I'm concerned for you, but I mean, you're going to do what you're going to do. And if we end up having a conversation and we go deeper, well, then I'll tell them, you know, what I think. But I'm not going to let me be divided from them, because the same Christ that came for me also came for them.
This is where I think this segues perfectly into this topic that I was having about denominations. And Gothic's response was, well, there's an objective truth. And my challenge to that as a fellow believer or a Christian is, if that's the case, then how are there 40,000 denominations of Christianity and 200 here domestically? People are reading the same text, right, and formulating wildly different conclusions. For example, Sunni asks Cash, right, why don't you want to be offensive? Because the beloved apostle Paul told the Galatians, am I your enemy because I tell you the truth? It was a rhetorical question, but the answer was yes. He became an enemy to them because he was being unapologetically honest with them. Christ did say, right, to dust the shoes off your feet if people won't receive you, right? But we're also instructed to judge judge not things according to their appearance, but to judge righteous judgment. So that would suggest that there is a framework of what is righteous and what is unrighteous. And when people are behaving in a manner that is unrighteous, it is our responsibility to tell that soul that they're sinning. So I can go read 5 to 6 dozens of scriptures.
Is that scripture that you just quoted though? Where's that at?
That's in the Old Testament and the New Testament.
No, where Paul was talking.
Galatians 4:16.
Galatians.
Right.
Okay.
But here's my point, right? Is transgenderism from
Don't get me
1980.
blocked. Don't get me blocked.
No, I'm not. From 1980 all the way up into 2012, it was considered, right?
I'm into
It was right on DSM-3 and DSM-4, and then in DSM-5 it was removed. You know what that represents to me? Cultural subversion. That is an alteration of what is standard and accepted. If you were to go talk to your parents, your grandparents, and about people like that, they would have told you them people is crazy, right? Today, we're treating these people as a special class that deserves special treatment. That's because somebody else's morality is being legislated, right? You know, this idea that you can't legislate morality is not true, which is why you have a lot of Christians that are becoming reactionary, and they're looking at the growth of decadence and the growth of the moral decay in society, and they're feeling like the only response mechanism, Cash, is to become offensive, is to become somewhat forceful because we think that our moral framework is superior.
Well, what I mean when I say that, I don't mean, like I say, when being offensive, I'm not going out of my way to be offensive, and I'm not trying to say something purposely to offend. I'm only telling you my truth. It's different. There's a difference in trying to be offensive and then trying to tell somebody the truth because you care about their soul or whatever it is that convicts you to talk to these people and try to change them.
So what do you? I do see what you're saying, but I guess my question is, right, from a legalistic standpoint, because I know you're a constitutionalist, right? And so if I understand your view correctly, it's as long as their behavior or activity does not violate my right to pursue life, liberty, and happiness and to maintain my own customs, right, then I can't try to impose my morality on them.
No,
right?
It's not that I can't try to impose. That's not what I mean when I say it. Again, so I believe that everybody's rights and freedoms should be protected in this country as long as they're not taken from me or harming me or my family, right? Whatever you want to do, that's what you do. That ain't got nothing to do with me until it does. And when it does, then I'll take the proper, I'll take the proper measures. I'll do what I need to do. But if that's not the case, then hey, I might not like it. I might not agree with it. There's a bunch of stuff I don't agree with that ain't got nothing to do with the transgender thing, just in general within this country. There's a bunch of things that I would like to see change. I don't like hearing some of the music that comes through the radio, the things that are propagated that come through the radio. I don't like hearing the alt-right guy that his voice is like nails on a chalkboard to me, Richard Spencer. I can't stand him. I can't stand his voice. I don't like his views, but he's an American and he has the right to use the same platforms that I use to say whatever it is that he wants to say, even though I disagree. And I have the right to make videos about it if I want to and call him out on it and say that I disagree with it. Now, if he gets offended by me disagreeing with it, even though I'm saying something that is right, that's a personal problem. I'm still not going to be aggressive towards you until you take from me or you touch me.
So I'll pass the mic. I got a quick question, and if everybody can answer it, I would appreciate it. So following that framework, Cash, here's the question. I don't know if the other Christians up here see it or believers. Well, I think everybody up here identifies as a believer. I don't know if Josh does or Jess does, but
I consider myself a believer.
Okay. So do you, Josh?
No, I wouldn't identify as a believer.
Okay, cool.
Like an agnostic.
Yeah, probably agnostic. So here's my question for you all. Maybe this is just my perspective, but I've seen that society has gradually grown more decadent, and immorality has become more standardized. Sexual immorality, sexual perverseness, the destruction of family, the erosion of the sanctity of marriage, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. And I would say that that's because the Constitution is not written to respect a religion, right? And therefore, it allows other ideas in the marketplace to compete with it and to eventually take over it because the other ideas are pleasurable to the flesh. So what is your response or what is your solution, right? for when how do I want to word the question? Rome, the Weimar Republic, and now what looks like America are all having similar falls, and one common characteristic in all of them is moral decay. Moral decay. How do you stop moral decay?
You can't stop moral decay, and this is the whole point for me as an influencer, right? The way that I can combat moral decay, because I can't stop it, I can combat it, and the only way that I can combat it is with my own behavior and trying to influence others to adopt some of the ways that I behave and some of the ways that I think, to see the error in their own ways that's causing the collapse of what we see around us. So again, it can't be something that's forced. Anytime you try to force anything on a people, they rebel, especially if they don't want it. You force anything on anybody, they rebel. So this is, again, I'll point back to Christ. Again, I will point back to Christ. Christ didn't make nobody follow him.
This is true.
The apostles didn't make nobody follow them. In fact, Christ told them, if they don't receive you in your message, take off your sandals, shake the dust off, and keep it moving. That's the only thing that we could do. That's it. And just not allow it to dictate our behavior. We can't allow what we see happening in the world make us change how we are. We have to keep standing the way that we are and doing what's right.
I think at some point we have to recognize, though, bro, in the Soviet Union, they were killing Christians.
Yeah.
Because Marx's objective is to dethrone God in capital. They hate religion. They think the religion is the opiate of the masses. So if the atheist, the secularist, the Marxist have their way, there could come a time where Christians are like that woman in the book of Maccabees, where her and her children are being forced to eat swine.
Right, but if you use that line of thinking, though, then you'll make a valid argument for, say, anybody. I use the word that we can't say that starts with a J and ends with a W. S.
Mm-hmm.
Use. Then people could point to them and say, look at what you've done throughout time. You were, if it wasn't for you, there would have been no chattel slavery. They wouldn't have had slave ships. You paid for the slave ships.
Yeah, but
if we look back at the past, the way that other countries ran, if we look back at the Crusades, or we look back at the Muslim conquest, we look back at all
everywhere, though.
I'm sorry?
Slavery existed everywhere.
I'm not saying it didn't. I'm saying with using that line of thinking, then we can point blame to somebody that they're not here no more. The people that did those things, they're not alive. We have our own society in our own lifetime, and we're seeing things happening around us. We could compare and say, well, this is how Rome fell and we're heading down the same path, or this is how this nation fell and we're headed down the same path. But we can't look to them for a solution in it, because they didn't have the solution or they wouldn't have failed. There is no solution. People are going to do what they want to do. The only thing that we can do is continue for us to be good people as best as we can, because not everything that we do is going to be considered good, especially if you throw religion in the mix. If you throw religion in the mix, a Muslim will look at you as a Christian and say, yes, you are very moral, you're doing all the right things, but sorry, you're blaspheming because you're equating somebody to be one with God or on equal footing with God. Plain and simple. Or a Jew can look at a Christian and say, oh, I can't, you might have all the stuff right, but at the end of the day, you accept that guy that we didn't. You're following something that's wrong. And then Christians can look at anybody else and say, well, you might be the nicest people in the world, and I know you're very strict in your religion, Muslims, and that you pray 5 times a day, but you don't accept Christ, so you're going to hell. You're a bad person. So we can't muddy it up with religion, no matter what our personal beliefs are. Our personal beliefs is for our personal. We congregate with people who are like us, that believe like us, so we can have that fellowship and not lose our faith, right? And we have the fellowship with the brothers, but we don't go out and try to push it on nobody else. We live it. We live it, and if they adopt it and they're like, yo, this dude is really dope, man, and then they present you with the opportunity. When they say, yo, bro, why are you like this? Why are you so cool, man? Like, why are you so level-headed? How come you could get along with everybody? How come this does? Oh, really, man? It's because I gave my life over to God, bro. You know what I'm saying? I serve Christ, man. I accept what he did for me, and he lives in me. It's not me that's doing the good. It's the Spirit of God working within me. And now you have the opportunity to try to change somebody's views. Now you have the opportunity because
Yeah,
they've asked.
and I get that, right? But that argument, I'm not going to say that it falls on deaf ears, but it's very palatable and pleasing to the people that I think Gothics would call Crowleyites. Live and let live. I want to do what I want to do, and just kind of let me, select select what portions of morality that I find fitting at times and apply them, and then when I don't apply them, it is what it is. Like the reality is that progressivism, right? Since the days of the Protestant Reformation, I'm not saying that I would have been opposed to the Reformation, Cash. I'm saying that there has been a gradual departure from God for the last 200 to 300, let's say, Enlightenment era forward, maybe even the Reformation era forward. And right now, I think it's reaching a precipice. And
well, think of this though, Deontay. Think about this. Islam is the fastest growing religion in the world, whereas Christianity is losing followers. So
right.
where you might see as an American that is a Christian, you see moral decay and you see people turning away from God. Other people on the other side that are Americans that are Muslim look and say, wow, look at how many people are turning to God.
Yeah, but I'm not living in an Islamic nation. I get your point, right? I don't think that not that we should ignore that there is a conversion of people. I think that would beg the question: why are people converting to Islam? Right? I think a lot of people are converting to Islam maybe because they see that there's a more strict adherence to the requirements, to the tenets of the faith that are beginning to wane in Christianity. Right, because Christianity has become very weak in the West because it's been.
I mean, again, now everything that we're saying here is our opinions, but when you go back again, if you go back and you look, well, then you could say that you have to say, if you're using that logic, that Islam being the fastest growing religion in the world, you're saying that it only became because it grew rapidly after what? About 300 years of it being in existence, it started just blowing up, right? So are you saying that all of those countries,
well, no, I mean,
Christianity was in moral decay at that time? Like they weren't real Christians, and that's why.
No, I'm not saying that.
Saying?
There were 4 crusades fought. Islam really had its birth at 600 AD, and it became a war conquest, right? So I want to give the floor to other people. We've been going back and forth on this.
Yeah, go ahead. Let somebody else take the floor. Go ahead.
Yeah, this is a complex discussion. I think that there's evidently, right, we live in a society where people are at a point where they can't differentiate between the organic biological sexes that people have. I would say that is widespread mental illness.
I agree.
And that's because there has been another religion that's crept in, and that religion is secular humanism.
There we go. I could get with that. Go ahead. Yeah. Whoever wants to take the floor.
I was going to say really quickly, I would put money down and say that I think the vast majority of people who are falling into this line of thinking there's multiple genders and you can do all these weird things, I think there's more of an incentive instead of them actually truly being mentally ill. Like if we think of like the doctors and the scientists, these people are incentivized to go along with the narrative because they don't want to lose their jobs. It's financially beneficial for them. We can say the same about teachers. We can say the same about progressive parents that don't want to have their kids taken away. So I think there's more of an incentive than the people legitimately who are crazy. But to the point of like, okay, how do we reach these people? I agree with Kelly, and I think we lead with love and we show them. People don't care what we know until they know that we care. And I think if we just live the way that Christ wants us to live and just be like that, a shining light to people in a very dark world, I think that will help, because the thing is, it's like, this is why the Bible says we got to pray for our enemies instead of fighting fire with fire, because that's what they're doing. They want us to lash out, so we're just going to keep this cycle going until we're all burnt. Someone has to say enough is enough and meet them where they are. And yeah, that could definitely, lead to more persecution on our side. But I mean, are we surprised by this? We should expect it,
You hitting it on the head. And Sudi, I want to let you and Jess and Josh go, but I want to say, man, what you just said right now is very deep, and I want people to remember this. Jesus himself said, if I be lifted up, then I will draw all men unto myself. And the only way that he be lifted up in today's society is through us, by our actions. by exemplifying him. So, Suni, go ahead.
Jess can go. No, she's been quiet for the longest.
I've been thinking about this. That's why, because it is hard. When you look at it from all the different angles and all the different religions, I struggle because I'm just like, I believe in America where you're allowed to kind of have freedom of religion also. But then we have to think about like, the terrorist part of that. So I think for me, I have gotten away from religion myself because I've seen like the way that we are celebrating the transgenderism, and all the things that the Bible really doesn't support. So I have become more of a believer in that way. But I also keep in mind that it's not my place to judge. Jesus died on the cross with felons. So at the end of the day, my job is to only just, be true to myself, I feel like, and really just hold on to that. You have to hold on to what you believe in, how you believe in God your way, and the rest will follow. Like you said, Cash, when you get to know people, they get to realize that you're a dope person and you can kind of drop seeds that way. I like to do that as well. I don't want to push anything that I have going on anybody else because then you will get that defensive, wall that people will put up and they'll have that pushback. So if we're really going to hope that we can get people to see things in a different way, you got to be a little softer. Working on that myself, but you know I think about it from a bunch of different ways now, and I'm not going to push myself on nobody.
There you go. Josh, how about you, brother? What's your take on all of this, man? Whatever you want to, however you want to get it.
Yeah, I agree with Jess. I think we're very similar in that way where I've never, like, for instance, when I said I'm not a believer, not in the regular way where I believe, like, I love the story of Jesus being pure love and being around the dispossessed and not being, a classist prick. And I love that story, but I don't believe Jesus is the only way to God. And that's my cutoff with Christians, and that's where I get into, that's where like the rift ends with that. So I believe other religions are correct, not to the Christian, obviously, right? Because, and I'm not trying to blend lines here. I think Christians should be who they are, or whatever they believe. I believe Buddhists, Muslims, whatever, Native American religions, they are what they are, and they're separate from what Christians are, and that's actually fine. This is where I agree as a lefty, or I believe in diversity. Like, I actually
Okay.
like that. Yeah.
Okay. Suni, how you feel about that?
I mean, Jesus said he came to divide. It's in Luke. We can have unity, but I believe unity amongst like-minded people is the best form of action. And I think unity amongst those like-minded people can lead to being a light for others so that they can then come and ask you, like you said, how do you walk around like this? How do you have such peace? But yeah, I don't believe in coming together with people that are antithetical to God. And I personally think that's what America is suffering from. I think the disconnect from God, their own interpersonal beliefs becoming king, and then having multiculturalism and diversity is watering things down. It's truly what I believe. And I don't believe that that's a hateful message. I believe that I'm going to stand on principles and values. And if Jesus himself said he came to divide father from son, mother from daughter, who am I to try to step in and do otherwise? I'm just going to keep going. And the people that are with me, they're with me. And the people that are against me, they're against me. We don't have to fight and be enemies. But I'm not going to bend and waver on anything.
Gothics.
I mean, I agree with Suni. It's I feel bad sometimes because a lot of people who follow my channel, they'll be like, we're on the same side, and I'm like, are we? Because to a certain extent, we're not. Like, we can agree, okay, we're on the same side. I'm politically homeless. I don't identify with any
Amen.
political label.
I'm right there with you.
But but it doesn't make any sense for even to assume that we're on the same side, because we can still be going in two separate directions morally. And that's what I noticed when I had my red pill moment, and I was butting heads with a lot of libertarians and Republicans on issues that I was like, oh, I thought we were on the same side. And as it turns out, you have a bunch of different worldviews all competing to legislate their own particular worldview. And that's why, this whole conversation of what do we mean by moral? It's really at the center of all of these cultural problems, or this culture war. So, it's more of like a question for the non-believers, like, okay, justify your position. Where are you, how are you coming to this conclusion? Because we can do as much protesting and politicking and voting as we want, and we can end up at the same problem a couple of years down the line, because this is a sin issue. It's a moral issue, and sin isn't going to go away.
Facts.
Okay, I like that. So for me, right? Or Deontay, did I ask you how you felt about that?
Nah, I'll be quick.
Okay.
I'm a realist. Multiculturalism is a non-starter. It will never work. It was designed to fail from its inception. You will not get people with multiple different religions and belief systems to coexist under one umbrella. It will only lead to violence. It's inevitable. It may have not got there yet, but when one ideology begins to dominate and infringe on another ideology's ability to practice their life uninhibited, it will lead to violent conflict. And to Sunni's point, Christ did not come to be harmonious with all people. Christ came to set a man at variance against his father, and a daughter at variance against her mother-in-law. Right? That's in the Bible. This idea is dangerous, and I get it. Right? It seems American, but I think this is where contextually we have to say, when the United States was formed, Puritans, the majority of the people that were coming to this country were of some derivative of Christian ideology. So 2024 is very different than 1789 when the Constitution was ratified, Cash. And so I don't know, bro. I don't know how we saw it, but I think that the Constitution, while it's a brilliant legal document, it's the best legal document that's ever been written. It's not strong enough to prevent this conflict that's brewing.
I'll tell you this. I'm gonna give you my take. Christ told them to render unto Caesar what is Caesar's, and unto God what is God's. And then when you look back at Daniel was living in a place underneath different customs, and they made a law that if you got caught praying, right? You got caught praying, you die. You get thrown in the lion's den. That's what the punishment was for Daniel, right? Daniel still continued to pray. Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego, they would not bow down before an idol, though they lived amongst these people and the people loved them. It was only the authorities. The authorities had something against them because the king loved them, and the king was not a godly man. The king didn't practice the same religion as them and did not believe the same as them, but he loved them because he seen what was in them, which was the light of God. This is how they rose to the positions that they was in the first place. They stayed on their principles to the point where when they saw all of society doing what they knew was evil, they protested in the form of not complying. They didn't take part in the actions that everybody around them did. Okay, so with that, when we look at America, when you see these, if they come out with a law that says you got to bow down before an idol, or you got to do something that is against God, and it's a law, then it's a problem. But right now, we're just dealing with people around us that do what they do, and it might not be what you like, right? It might not be what you like at all. It might be totally detestable according to your faith or even just your morals. But if it's not affecting you, you stand like Daniel. You stand like Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego.
Yeah.
And you just be loved among the people for your actions because of the light that they see in you. Even the wicked, even the wicked people are gonna be like, yo, Deontay's dope, Sunni's dope, Jess is dope, Josh is dope, Gothics is amazing, right? And they can't find no fault in you, except you have a different ideology than them, a different faith than they have, but you don't let that divide you from them in the sense of you being a horrible person to them by your actions. You stay being you and you keep your strong faith and you keep your strong beliefs. There's nothing wrong with that. But you don't go out there and make, unless there, and this is one thing that I want to throw out there before I give it to you. I want y'all to remember, man. It says in that word, judge not lest ye be judged, right? And Paul,
with the same judgment that you are judging,
right? And Paul instructed them, yo, you don't judge nobody outside of the house. If somebody is not a part of your faith, it is not for you to judge them. I don't judge nobody that's outside the house, Paul said. We reserve judgment for those that are in the house. So that judgment and that zeal that you feel when you want to correct somebody, make sure that they share the same faith as you. Because then you can hold them accountable using the same book that you read.
Right.
And you do that even with love. And with that, take the floor. Nobody? We done?
Yeah, no, I mean, I don't disagree with anything you said, bro. I wasn't so much speaking from my personal faith is my personal faith and belief, right? My understanding and interpretation of the text. So I'm going to, in my personal life, embody the things that you're talking about. But I still think what I said is real, right? Which is, back to your original question: is there a culture war? Yes, there's a war of cultures. If Gothic says that it's a war of good and evil, and Sunni says it's a war of good and evil, that semantics, good and evil war, culture war. At the end of the day, coexist is it has an inevitable destructive outcome.
Just block them. Don't even pay attention to it.
There you go. You're gone. You're gone. I don't like that. You don't tag my panel. I'm glad I looked over at them comments right now. I was about to let loose. I was about to go back to 2020 cash right now, and I had to remember, bro. You just remember what you just said right now, right? You just remember what you just said right now, Cash. Be the example. Gonna be the example. But no, man. No, I appreciate all of you guys joining us today, man. I appreciate everybody that's on the panel for your discussion, your insight, all of that. And I got to ask the question. We got to do this at the end of every show. We all still love each other?
Oh, absolutely. Yeah. So
difference of opinions
ain't
doesn't
no
make a
love
difference.
Yep.
Yep.
Well, my feelings are hurt. I'm gonna go tweet about it.
Go ahead. I'm waiting. Go ahead, Sunni.
I just said I'll think about it. Now let me stop. Of course.
No,
I don't dislike anybody, dude. I love everyone.
Let me tell you, I love all of y'all. Literally, I mean that. I love all of y'all, man. Straight up. And if I could ever do anything for any of y'all, even if I don't care if we have differences of opinions, that is, you're like, yo, there's no way that they could be friends. You could count on me to be a friend. I don't care if we get mad at each other in a live, Deontay, or any of that. You need
I ain't
me,
going on
I'm
TikTok
right
with
here.
you no more, bro. I ain't
You
going
heard?
on TikTok.
I'm right here, man. Y'all need me, I'm right here. I don't care what it is. If I could do
Unless
it, I
I'm the
will
host.
do it. You guys are
Oh
awesome.
my God.
All right, that's all I want to say. And to everybody that's watching this show,
unlike you and Sunni, I'm kicking people out immediately. I have no.
Why do I always take flack for Deontay's behavior?
Yeah,
dude,
Deontay,
I got online today on TikTok.
Accountability, brother.
I got online today on TikTok and I was catching heat.
Before we get off, I want everybody to tell them where they can follow you at. We'll start with Sunni, and we'll just go
heat for me today, Sunni?
Hell yeah, I
think
heat.
Sunni was trying to say something.
I caught heat. It was ridiculous. You had Deontay on your show, and he just talks too much, and you don't. I'm like, first of all, I wasn't even there. I let them take over the live.
I caught the heat. Oh, wait, what'd you say?
No, I did. I'm catching heat for your shenanigans. I didn't even do it.
Man,
for my 2024, why I catch heat for that?
She's talking to demonologists. That's code word for Democrat.
Don't do
Yeah.
that.
But here,
Don't.
Tony, let them know where they can follow you at, and then we'll go around the circle, man. Y'all funny as hell.
So you can just type in SUNY Blanks on all my platforms. One of my pages will pop up. I'm banned often, so I do keep backup pages. Just follow them all, and if you see me live on one of them, cam up and let's have a discussion.
Deontay, where can they follow you at, man?
D-Blade Ford. That's my handle on everything. TikTok, YouTube, Instagram. Did I say TikTok? TikTok, my bad.
TikTok.
Gothics, where can they follow you at, sis?
Yeah, thanks for inviting me on. You guys can follow me on YouTube at Gothics TV and on Twitter, same username.
All right, Josh.
I'm about to follow you.
Yeah,
I
thanks
know I
again
followed her
for
too.
having me on.
You're always welcome, brother.
Yeah, so Joshua Joseph, and that's spelled Joshuah. It has H at the end. Facebook, Instagram, TikTok.
Okay, Jess, where can they follow you at?
You can follow me on Facebook on Jess Marie. I'm not cool enough to have all my my accounts linked up. Maybe one day I will be, but that's what happens when you get banned too much and you have to make new accounts. They all got to be different. So one day I'll get there.
And you can follow me at right where you are right now, because that's how you're watching the show. I appreciate you guys. I hope y'all have a fantastic night. God bless you. Peace.